Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's conversation. It is my absolute delight to welcome Mary Connor, who is the co founder and executive director of Soccer Without Borders. Mary is joining me from Massachusetts today. So, Mary, tell us, how did you found Soccer Without Borders?
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here today. So I want to tell you a little bit about Soccer Without Borders and how it got started. We're a nonprofit organization. We have hubs in 5 different cities in the US and 2 internationally, including Grenada and Nicaragua, which you're all supporting. Our vision is a more inclusive and equitable world through soccer. And soccer and sport more widely is one of the most powerful cultural and social forces on earth. In 2018, more than 4 billion people watched the World Cup, which is more than half of humanity. So it's just this really incredibly powerful thing that can either mirror the world as it is and the inequities the world has, or it can choose to shape it. And Soccer Without Borders, we choose to shape it. For way too long, girls and women have been on the sidelines of sport. It's a place that's been dominated by men. And the consequences of that go far outside of sport. Where women are left out of sport, they're also left out of education and business and career pathways. So when you have this incredibly powerful thing that could shape the world, and you harness that power to address an issue like gender equality, the results are tremendous. It can just transform cultural expectations and smash glass ceilings like the one the US women just smashed in their equal pay settlement. So Nicaragua is a place where there's still a lot of work to be done. And I first traveled there in 2008 when my career as a professional soccer player was kind of just winding down, and I had started coaching at a college in Pennsylvania called Lehigh University. And when I was there, I met Ben Bucciardi, who's the founder of Soccer Without Borders. And I learned about this idea, really. That's what it was. It was just an idea, a thesis of his that believed that sport could be a living classroom. And Lehigh University gave us $5,000 and a high five to go start and try to turn this idea into an organization. So my trip to Nicaragua in 2008 was really the first one under this banner of Soccer Without Borders. And I arrived and there was just no opportunities for girls in sport. Everywhere you went, you could see boys playing, and nowhere could you see spaces for girls. So we went literally school to school, community to community, door to door, inviting girls to join this program and do this thing that was not what they thought the community expected of them, not what girls did. And it was incredibly powerful because you saw that girls really wanted that. Within weeks, we had managed to put together kind of our first camp and 50 girls coming to play. We had trained all these coaches. There's these small but meaningful steps towards this vision to create what thousands of girls in the US like me get to experience because of women who came before me. We're trying to pay it forward in a way to this community in Nicaragua. But what I learned on that first trip, I brought with me a lot of my American education that says that we can just sort of go to a country and start up a program and train people and then leave and it'll just thrive. And that is not how it works. And I learned very quickly on that first trip that it would take years, not months. I learned that something that is a quote that now hangs in my office, that change happens at the speed of trust. And that trust, when there's so much complex history, when there's scarcity, when there's need, when there's individual and collective trauma, it just takes a really long time to build the level of trust, to build something stable and sustainable. But we planted important seeds and built relationships on the soccer field and this mutual love of sport that we had. And I think, truthfully, my ability to play and coach gave us some credibility that we could build on. I think, Vina, I told you this story when we first met, but on that early trip, I have a good friend who was also a professional player who flew down to to kind of help me build this. And one night we were walking home with one of our local coaches, Chepe, and we came upon this kind of 3-versus-3 soccer game under a street lamp. It was dark. I think you could go anywhere in the world and see this same scene, like 6 guys playing 3-versus-3 soccer with, a deflated ball in the middle of the street at night. Common scene. What is uncommon is a team of 2 women and 1 man coming up and saying, "Hey, can we play against the winners?" And so we asked, "Can we play in?" And when there's 3 teams, the way it works is whoever wins gets to stay, and the team that's off comes on and plays. So we came on to the next game. They laughed at us, but they said, "Sure, you can play." We came upon it. We came into the game, and we won something like 9 games in a row. And the men were just like shocked and surprised and angry and yelling at each other. And then by the 9th game, they were just like, "You can play, you can play." They had just genuinely never seen women who could play in this way. And for structural reasons, for access to information, technology reasons, they just didn't know. And what was true of the men in that community at that time was also true of the girls. Early on in the program, we asked if they could name any female athlete, and only 1 girl could name 1 tennis player out of the entire group of 50 that we had. And so this change happens at the speed of trust. It takes person by person kind of changing and trusting that something new can happen, that where I thought girls and women couldn't be in spaces, well, now they can. And actually, that's fine. And a lot of these men became champions of the program. Their sisters, their daughters, their cousins, they're in the program. And a lot of those girls that we started with in 2008, I have some of their signatures on the banner behind me. They're now coaches in the program. 14 years later, they've gone to college, and they are now paying it forward in their own community. So this sparking of change, it can happen person by person, but it really takes the right leader to make it happen. And that leader must come from within the community. So in a second, I'm going to introduce you to our local director, Veronica Valladares, who doesn't speak English. So I'm sort of speaking. I asked her to record something so I could translate it for her. But I met Veronica on that first trip in 2008. And I knew right away she was the unicorn in this community that we were looking for. She was a phenomenal soccer player in a place where that didn't exist for women. She had finished university, was pursuing a psychology degree to become a clinical psychologist. And early on, I saw this, but she, to be honest, wouldn't work for us for a number of years. Every year, I would, go knock on her door and say, "Hey, do you want to play? Let's go play some pickup." And then I'd subtly ask her if she'd be willing to work for us and, lead the program. And she agreed. She clearly believed in the mission and agreed to work a few hours each week around her full-time job schedule and coach one of the teams. But we wanted her to work full-time. I wanted her to be the director. But back then we didn't pay anything. And this is a woman who had gone to university and broken every barrier and every cultural norm to have a career. And she wasn't going to drop that for what at the time felt like a passion project. So she told me that when we became credible enough and legit enough for her to quit her job, she would do that in a heartbeat, but that it would take until then. They needed to be real jobs with benefits and competitive pay. And that's what it takes to recruit someone who is such a unicorn, or somebody that is the right leader to the program. I'm excited to introduce her so that you all can see her.
Go ahead.
She has taught me so much about the privilege that I sort of brought into this work when I first met her, and what it takes to build that trust over time to really create something transformative together with the community. So let me just, Vina, I think I'll need to share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Let me do that. Here we go.
Hola, soy Verónica Valladares, co-director de Fútbol Sin Fronteras en Nicaragua. Quiero compartir un poco de lo que estamos trabajando actualmente. Quiero mencionarte que tenemos 9 equipos solo de niñas, extendidos por edades de la categoría U6 hasta la categoría U17. También contamos con 3 equipos especiales en donde nos están representando a nivel nacional. Aparte de lo deportivo, quiero mencionarte esta parte de lo que estamos trabajando. Tenemos un espacio en donde las niñas vienen a divertirse. Creamos actividades súper divertidas, en donde las chicas se sienten felices. También hacemos manualidades y cosas muy recreativas. La otra parte de este espacio es que realizamos talleres de formación en donde tocamos temas en que les ayude al desarrollo de las niñas. Por ejemplo, tenemos los valores, autoestima, autocuido, higiene. Para nosotros es muy importante la salud mental de las participantes. Son muy vulnerables, trabajamos con niñas de escasos recursos y pues tenemos que trabajar esta parte. Para nosotros es muy, muy importante que nuestras niñas estén física y mentalmente sana, estable. Dentro del programa, dentro de la organización tenemos un programa educativo en donde tenemos niñas becadas en primaria, secundaria, universitaria. Y una meta para el 2023 es que queremos tener más niñas becadas en primaria. El programa sigue creciendo y tenemos niñas de estas edades que están en primaria y también queremos brindarles las mismas oportunidades de las niñas que ya están con nosotros. Y pues queremos tener que todas las niñas tengan las mismas oportunidades. También tenemos otro programa que para nosotros es muy importante, el programa de liderazgo. Desde pequeña miramos el potencial en las niñas con el liderazgo y pues creamos un grupo en donde tenemos jóvenes con estos rasgos de liderazgo y pues lo que hacemos aquí solo es fomentar, brindarles herramientas a estas chicas en donde ellas puedan tener esta confianza, de tener unas mejores relaciones interpersonales, en donde ellas puedan tener estas habilidades sociales y puedan ponerlo en práctica en su escuela, en la comunidad, aquí mismo con nosotros, con el programa y un proyecto para el próximo año es que queremos de que estas líderes jóvenes crean proyectos en donde ellas lo lideren y sean capaces de crear este impacto en que el liderazgo femenino está fuerte, lo estamos trabajando y que se mire por esta parte. Y pues solo me resta agradecerles a ustedes, a Together Women Rise. Gracias.
Thank you, Mary, for that absolutely wonderful video of Veronica and some of the ideas that you and I have been talking about. I definitely want to reiterate that Together Women Rise, we fund US 501c3s, right? But in our grant selection, we are always looking to see how the message comes across. It should not appear, like you said, of privilege from the global north going to the global south and telling people what to do or seeking solutions that come from the global north. It has to be homegrown. So in our grant selection, we definitely look for that, and Soccer Without Borders definitely exuded those kinds of ideas. The other thing that you were talking about, how Veronica pushed back a little bit and said, well, in order for me to work for you, I have to be paid, I need my benefits, which is true of the nonprofit world. You know, we have to dignify people who work in the nonprofit world with good salaries, competitive salaries. There's a lot of love and compassion and all of that. But there should be reality also. Absolutely, which is why Together Women Rise does fund salaries in a lot of, the personnel part, because this is what organizations need. So we are absolutely on the same wavelength. This is a Together Women Rise, and we love that. Moving on to things that are happening out in the world. 50 years of Title IX. You are a beneficiary of Title IX. Talk more about it.
Yeah, I think this moment in time, it can't be talking about creating opportunities in sport and education for girls without acknowledging that we're at this moment, this milestone, 50 years of Title IX, and what that has done in the United States to provide thousands, hundreds of thousands of opportunities for girls like me to have access to this holistic education that includes education for mind, body, and spirit. And you think about what sport can support, not just in the life skills that people talk about, communication, leadership, teamwork, collaboration. Certainly sport does enforce all of those things, and you learn them inherently, especially with a coach who is able to really pull those moments out and teach through them. But in addition to that, there's so much around identity and self-expression and self-worth that comes from sport. And you think about what it means to have an entire 50 years of women with access to this transformative opportunity to take ownership of our voices, our bodies, our futures. It's one of the things I see most, like we talk in our world about the most significant change. And as an educator, as a coach, you get to see this most significant change happen in kids in these moments. And for me, one of them that happens all the time on the field in Nicaragua is this field is sort of in the center of town. And so people can ride by, boys can ride by on their bikes, men are walking by, people notice the girls playing, and it hadn't been that common. And you can tell these moments where the girls are sort of hyper conscious or even sit down if men walk by or if boys are sitting on the sideline. They won't play in front of them. There's a performative aspect to sport. And then over time, you see them just stop really caring what other people think about them, and they don't see their bodies just as something for men to look at or that always has to look in the way that men want it to look. You see them to take ownership and view their own bodies, their own decision-making as up to them, and where they can say to their parents, hey, I want to join the soccer team, or they can, play in a practice where they're sweating and they're dirty and dusty and walk right by the boys with confidence and not feel like they need to be a certain way for them. And that's one of the most significant changes that I've seen. And I think about how the United States has this incredible opportunity at this moment to think about the next frontier. What's the next 50 years of Title IX's legacy? Is it international? Is it exporting this belief that women can occupy spaces that have been dominated by men, like soccer? Like that is a very male-dominated space, sport as a whole. Can the next frontier be the US being the global advocate for this? I think we're already doing that. The women's national team certainly is. I was in France at the Women's World Cup final in 2019. The whole 60,000 person stadium started chanting equal pay at the end of the game. I mean, it can be really socially and culturally powerful.
Absolutely.
With the right leadership. And I think US women's soccer are leading in those ways. And I think all of us, all of you, and Together Women Right, we can all carry the torch in our own ways. And certainly a place where I've gotten to work with women like Veronica to bring that torch is to underserved communities where the potential of girls is just as great as Northampton, Massachusetts, where I live, but they need to have the opportunities. They need people to see that potential in them and create laws to enshrine the opportunities that they deserve. So I hope that's the next 50-year legacy, as we go beyond our borders to really ensure that there's pathways for girls everywhere, but that also we don't take for granted that the fight is over here, that we keep, pushing within the United States also to make sure Title IX is enforced and that we build on it.
Mm-hmm. As we wrap up, I absolutely agree with you. When I was growing up in India, there was such limited opportunities for girls in sports. The boys allowed us to play cricket with them.
The sport is cricket, yeah. I still don't know how to play that sport.
Yeah, and you don't get enough exposure to even become better, right?
Yeah.
So I know it's extremely important because women and girls around the world do look at the United States as a leader in human rights and women's rights and, pushing the envelope on so many different things. As we wrap up, can you remind our audience what it was that US Women's Soccer League kind of got out of the equal pay and the collective bargaining arrangements?
Yeah, I think equal pay has been something that's been fought for in so many sectors. And this played out in soccer because the United States women's national team just objectively is a better team than the men. Like, they've won 4 World Cups. They've been world champion 4 times. The men have been world champion 0 times. And yet they were paid less. They consistently sell out stadiums. They actually brought in more revenue than the men's team a number of years, and yet we're still paid less. And so they sued. And the lawsuit led to a number of different, iterations and challenges. It ultimately led to a settlement that they would redefine the collective bargaining agreement. The settlement came in February of this year, and then a new collective bargaining agreement was just announced last month, where they're actually going to take the money that the men get and the women get and put it in one pot and divide it equally. Instead of saying, we're going to predetermine the amount, we're saying, like, you're one team. In fact, that's their slogan, is one team. And so to see the men's team also, buy into this and say, hey, we're one nation, we're one team, and that should mean that we're all valued equally within that. So I know nothing is ever perfect, but and they'll continue to evolve. But it was a massive step. No other national team in the world has come to an agreement like this, where they'll divide money that actually was paid to the men's side, that they'll put that in a shared pot and divide it equally. So it's a huge step forward. And, I believe that sport can lead the way in shaping the world and not just accepting the inequities of the world on their face, because those do play out in sport. Where there's equal pay in the country, there's equal pay in sport. One drives the other. So this is a huge step.
Absolutely. Mary, it has been such a delight to have you, your professional career, and your passions lead the way into these conversations about soccer, sport, gender equality, and how that can lead the way for more social change. It is our absolute honor to fund Soccer Without Borders, and we so look forward to hearing what comes next for all of you. Good luck.
Thanks so much for having me.